Hello, my name is Braden Gouveia. I'm a graduate student at the Department of Spanish and Portuguese at Vanderbilt. Today I'm going to describe a language lesson activity that I've created, and I've used activities that are similar to this in my language classes. The title, well, the website that I'm going to use happens to be cram.com. It's a website that a student can use to create flashcards and print them off or save them as PDF files on a whole sheet of paper. But any website that's similar to this will work, and you don't really have to use the flashcard idea that I'm going to describe. It's the most important part of the activity is what the students think and produce. This is another step that I thought would be interesting to do to kind of finish the activity. So I have this lesson plan worksheet, and in English, the English title of this activity would be, I suppose, the oddly familiar, using language to describe what we know, but what might not have a word. The idea is that students can reflect and think about words that they think about experiences and moments in their life as last year that don't have a formal definition in the dictionary. And so that we start at those experiences and then we move toward the creation of a word. A lot of times in language classes, we focus on memorizing formal words that are in dictionaries and like they're set in stone. But when we think about words that are different in German or French or Japanese, the words that exist in those languages that might not exist in others aren't things that we're familiar with those things. We just don't have the word for them. And the idea is that the students are going to think of words, invent words to describe things that they've all experienced. Um, and so the important part of the activity is not per se the word they choose to define that or describe that experience, but the reflection on those experiences and describing them. And also recognizing that all those experiences that they're familiar with and that they could speak about don't have maybe a specific word in the dictionary. And I think my hope, at least for me, it has been kind of liberating. And I'm going to highlight some more of these as we go through, but that's the basic description that I wanted to give before I go through some of the steps. This will have some writing and culture, but the writing, basically the activity is to focus on what precedes the writing and the speaking. It's the reflecting on how to describe experiences. The duration of the project, I would give this a few days for the students to think about things, even over a weekend. I'm going to put that right there. I'm going to use the website cram.com as we'll go to it in a little bit. Let's see. Cram.com. Let's see. I've already given some description. This activity has a lot to do with communication, and it includes cultures. And I'm going to have to say this is about connecting and comparisons. Communities, I could see, but not so much community. It's more of an individual, interpersonal, and interpretive task. But it's something that the community may have experienced. That I believe. Learners will be able to apply language to life. And that's something that I'll show in this example. And the rest of this I won't fill out, but this is a quick overview of some of the things that I will do. And I created an activity just as a model. This is something that I would do. Before we get to the part with the flashcards, I'm going to take this out right now because that would be my answer to the prompt. This is the name of the hypothetical class, my name, the Spanish title I would give this activity, and the theme of this specific activity is going to be life during COVID-19, the pandemic. Interesting to reflect on how life's been different. So the moment they're going to describe, and this is something that the professor, the instructor would create a prompt, something that would situate the student. When you're in a Zoom class and now all the students will have that prompt, the student at home or in the library would have to think of the second half of that moment. And the one I thought of would be this. When the Zoom meeting is ending and you want to stay behind on Zoom to be able to talk with the professor about something, about school, about an assignment. It's not a formal office hour or meeting time, but it's an opportunity to ask a quick question. There's not a name for that. But it's something I'm sure a lot of us who have taught or have been students have experienced or thought of doing or have done, and it's perfectly fine. The word though, I thought either one of these would work. There's probably people who could think of much better ones than these, but I thought this is not the part that's most important to the activity. That the student will have maybe a little bit of fun thinking of a term, but the idea is that they think about describing an action that they're familiar with and recognizing that that action that they've experienced might be wordless. I think it's interesting for them to then create language on two different levels. They create a word to describe that, and they also um, describe the activity. And the second moment, I put three examples, is when you're wearing a mask and you realize it's much more comfortable to maybe yawn in public because you're wearing a mask. It could be in a library or in a class. I don't know. And the name I thought of is El Canto Anónimo. This is the first term I thought of. And this is the part where the students can be really experimental and just rather humorous because it's not the point that matters, but it's all part of the activity though. The third example is when it's your turn to choose a movie, maybe on Netflix, but your friend's parents or your neighbor's parents or your roommate's parents change the password on the Netflix account. It's something I'm sure many of us have experienced. And there's not a word for that in English that I know of or Spanish that I know of. And I thought, well, let's tag a word onto this experience. I thought of una caleta a ciegas. Una caleta is a bay. And I don't know why, but this is some figurative language came out, and I thought this was a nice way of describing this. But then again, to emphasize, this is not the activity. The focus of the activity is this. It's fun to think of interesting ways to describe an experience, but that it's all part of the overall experience. Activity. In cram.com, for example, you can set a title. Life. You can do it in Spanish or whatever language you're going to use. Life in the pandemic. You could use the target language, description, and the students can include. These are my examples I just showed. My last two examples, and I'm going to stick the first one in the top to demonstrate how this is done. Maybe the prompt half will go first. That's not that one. So the first half of the prompt, and the students, answer the second half of the prompt, followed by the word. I'm going to use my second example. And again, I would never have my students memorize words that they've just invented, but getting them to use websites like cram.com will make them more familiar with how to make flashcards for in any day that they need to use flashcards in the Spanish class. Now they could take this and download it on a sheet of paper on a PDF. You can have a number of these on your one sheet of paper, and they could email this to you. They could print it and send and give it to you in person. I think it's worthwhile. Just the creativity of it is worthwhile all in itself. And so these are some things I wanted to clarify and explain in this activity. And I think when I've used activities like this in the past, it was great. My students really enjoyed them, and they learned, and they were able to be creative in the target language. Thank you very much.